Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi, the Mai, Perek Beis, Halacha Beis, and God willing, starting Halacha Gimel. We're going to be learning today Daf Yud Tes. We're starting on Daf Yud Tes all the way on top of the Amid. Before we recap Shitas Rabbi Yehuda and the Machlekes of Rabbi Yoina and Rabbi Yosi, I just want to make a very important correction. That even though yesterday we have been using the word going from the Amoritz to being a Chaver, that's not correct. We're speaking about someone who was an Amoritz, who by making the specific Kabbalah, which means a public acceptance of specific upping of one's standards, that will elevate the person not to the status of Chaver, but our topic is to go into the status of Nemon. Now, in content, it's the same thing. Up until the person is a Nemon, if we buy produce from him, from her, we have to separate the Mai. The Hachlata, the Kabbalah that we have been learning about is regarding specifically one's adherence to properly removing, separating all of the Trumas Umaisris, and then the person will be Nemon, meaning when you buy produce from him, when you receive produce from him and from her, you don't have to separate the Mai separations. Chaver is a term that's used for someone that not only is very careful when it comes to Maisres, but also to Tuma and Tara, and that will actually be the topic of the next Mishnah at the end of today's daf. So just to change the words, we're learning about how does one become a Nemon from being in the status of a Ha'aretz. Now, after specifying the Kabbalah, we quoted the Rambam that has to be done in front of two people. We're going to learn today that Asher Eliyahu holds that this type of Kabbalah has to be done in front of three people. Rabbi Yehuda holds after the person accepting upon himself not to eat out by people that are still in the category of Amaratzim, what were to happen if someone went there? And we do recognize the importance of certain social behaviors, which would mean that if your friend invited you over, yeah, it's correct to go there. So what will happen? Will the person regress back to the status of Am Ha'aretz? The Chachamim say, yeah. And Rabbi Yehuda says no. And on that we had the Machlekes, Amoraim, Rabbi Yoina, Rabbi Yosi. Rabbi Yoina understands that the reason why Rabbi Yehuda holds that even though the person who was not planning to go eat out, but they went there, they don't lose their newly acquired Nemon status. So as the Gabe pointed out, there's really two ways of understanding it, two ways of understanding Shitas Rabbi Yoina. Either that we trust that the host, the Balabas, which is an Amaretz, because of his knowledge that his friend just became a Nemon, he will go the extra mile. He will make sure that all of the Trumas Umaisris were removed. So therefore, even though he ate there, we know that he ate only that which is properly tithed. Another way of understanding the Shita of Rabbi Yoina is that we trust this Nemon that he will remove it himself. And we're going to speak a little bit more how such a thing actually could be done in a very discreet way. And we believe that he did it. That is Rabbi Yoina. In other words, we know that just because he ate out there, we don't presume that he ate the Mai produce. Rabbi Yosi has a greater chiddush, Bishitas Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yosi holds that even if this person who went there actually ate, and he ate produce straight from the house of the Am Ha'aretz, without separating the Trumas Meiser, without separating and then redeeming the Meiser Sheni, he is not demoted because we cut him slack. He needed to go there for social reasons. Okay, that he was embarrassed not to eat or embarrassed to separate, but we still trust him that when he leaves the home of the Ha'aretz, he will go back to his newly acquired Nemon status. That is where we are up to.
I'm sorry. Do we say what he buys from them? Maybe Tommy from a Nemon?
No. Forget about Tumantara. We're not speaking about that at all yet.
Got it.
Okay. Now, even though the end of Daf Yud Chesamad Beis pointed out that it's mashma from our Mishnah, Kishitas Rabbi Yoina, in his understanding of the Tana Rabbi Yehuda, it doesn't refute Rabbi Yosi, because on top of today's daf, we're going to learn other statements which will support the understanding of Rabbi Yossi. Now, in this discussion, we're going to speak about something very important, which is that what will happen if someone makes the Kabbalah that we learned about in Halacha base, but he did not make it on all of the details. He left out one, L'kula Alma, even according to Rabbi Yehuda, Ein Mekabelin Oisei. Versus our topic that the person made the proper Kabbalah, and now we have a chshad, whether he broke this specific one, which is eating out in the house of the Am Haaretz. There is where Rabbi Yehuda has a place to be lenient, and we're going to actually speak a few more details, Bishitas, Rabbi Yehuda. Now, we're going to learn another din, that even if a person did not make such a public hachlata, the Lashon HaMishnah Kabbalah, but we know that this person is even neman on taharas. In other words, we see that he eats chulin betara, which is a stringency beyond the letter of the law. That in itself gives this person a certain level of nemanus, but that nemanus will only be applied in private and not in public. We'll speak this out on the daf. In public, every person needed to make the Kabbalah, prior to which you cannot buy produce without having to separate the demai separations. And finally, what will happen if you have a household where the man is now a neman because he made the Kabbalah? His wife never made such a Kabbalah. Or in the opposite, the woman is nemen, she made the Kabbalah. The man is not neman. How does that affect how we are to interact with the household? And if we'll have time, and God willing, we'll have time, we'll begin Halacha Gimel at least. We'll begin the next Mishnah that's going to speak to the greatest level of how to become a chaver. And the key chiddush will be that not only will the Kabbalah that has to be made be regarding maisvis, and also tahara, as we'll go into the detail, it's not only that, but specifically when it comes to becoming a chaver, after the person makes a Kabbalah, he still, or she is still on a 30-day trial period. In other words, by going from Am Haaretz to Neman, you make a Kabbalah. Once you make the Kabbalah, you automatically go into the status of a Neman, unless we find out that you didn't keep your resolution. But when it comes to becoming a Chaver, there's a 30-day trial period, as we'll speak out of the Rosh Hashanah, only after which do you become a Chaver. Meaning, for example, just what would that mean? That let's say that a Kohen Chaver, who's accepting Truma from this person, what's the presumption regarding the Truma food? If the person is not a Chaver, you have to be suspicious that the food is Tameh. Truma that's Tameh may not be eaten. Now, you don't know for sure that it's Tameh, so you can't burn it. That's the whole toilet. You have to wait until it becomes Vaday Tameh, and then you have to dispose of it. And you could have Hana'ah by using it for fuel, but you can't eat it Bevada. You can burn it. Once the person becomes a chaver, I'm a chayin. Now a kohen who receives truma from that person, if the person tells him it's tahar, then you can go ahead and eat it. This is more or less a sikum of today's daf. And now let's go right inside Daf Yutes Amud Aleph, all the way on top of the Amid. Now we will back up the sheet of Rabbi Yossi. Says the Gemara, Mi leihoim the Rabbanan, from the words of other of our sages. Then from there, Messiah al Rabbi Yossi, we will back up the chiddush, the leniency of Rabbi Yossi b'shittas Rabbi Yehuda. To Amar Rabbi Chanina, in the name of Rabbi Yasson, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Now these words, as we will see, only make sense if we understand that Rabbi Yehuda, the way Rabbi Yossi does, that Lo Yama Rabbi Yehuda Ela Basoy, that we only accept Rabbi Yehuda's words are only regarding the end. Now, what are we talking about? We're thinking about this newly acquired Neman, this person who newly acquired an Neman status, who now got an invite from his Chaver, and he went there, even though his friend is still a Am Haaretz. So Rabbi Yochanan is saying that when does Rabbi Yehuda say in the Mishnah that he doesn't lose his Neman status? Only at the end, meaning the way the Marafuld explains, when he goes back home, when he left eating from his friend's house. Abel Batchila, but initially, says the Maraful, the meaning while he's still in the home, when he's still a guest by the Am Haaretz, Af Rabbi Yehuda is Maida, that what? that he's not to be trusted, which means that if while he's in the house of his host, he gives whatever he has, some produce, to another Jew, the other Jew cannot eat it without first separating the demai separations. In other words, even Rabbi Yehuda is going to hold that while he's in the home, during that period, he downgrades his status. He goes back to the status of Ma'amaretz. And now the Gemara is going to prove that for Rabbi Yochanan to say it, he must have understood Rabbi Yehuda the way Rabbi Yossi did and not the way Rabbi Yochanan did. Because in Tamar Chaveden en Chashudim loy moichal v'loy lahachel, if we were to understand Rabbi Yehuda the way Rabbi Yochanan understands Rabbi Yehuda, that even when you are in the house of the Am Haaretz, either he won't give you demai, or you will separate all of the separations. In other words, the presumption is that you never downgraded your resolution. So ma bein batchila, ma bein basoif. Why would Rabbi Yochanan make such a differentiation? Even while you are a guest, you should still be neman. The fact that Rabbi Yochanan, it said b'shem Rabbi Yochanan, that Rabbi Yehuda's leniency of being generous and not downgrading his status is only when he goes out of the house of his host, is a raya that in the house of his host he might not be behaving properly. The only thing is that we understand it and we don't allow him now to be recategorized as a Yama'aretz. And now the Gemara goes further. Tani, that's the way the Gerso we will learn, not the Tani, but Tani. We learned in a Braisa. Hamakabel olav liyos neman chutz midavar echad. Now hamakabel olav liyos neman chutz midavar echad. So the Mishnah says he has to make all of the different statements, right? What were the different statements? He has to make a statement that eshuhu oichel. That number one. Number two, eshuhu moichel. Number three, eshuhu loikeya. And number four, ve'enoi misorech eitzel ha'aretz. Even according to Rabbi Yehuda, lechatchila, when he makes the Kabbalah, he has to say that I'm not going to go out and eat by people unless they are ne'emanim already. He has to make that. So he has to make 4 statements. What happens if he skipped any one of these 4 steps? From the outset, he never made that Kabbalah. According to everyone, even Rabbi Yehuda, says the Braisa, ein mekablin oisai. Wow. This is great. In other words, even regarding to that which he did accept, he's also not going to be believed. You know what this is very similar to? When a person converts. And if from the outset they're saying, well, I'm being makabel only 612 mitzvahs, which is amazing because we don't have to, the ger doesn't have to know all of the mitzvahs to be makabel them, right? That's the halacha. We teach them some of the chamuris, some of the kalos. But if he says, I am not accepting something by the ger, we don't accept them to begin with. Here it's a little bit different, but it's the same idea. No, it's lachatchila when you make the Kabbalah. The Mishnah says you have to articulate 4 specifics. You have to be makabel those 4 specifics. However, and now comes another thing in the Brais. You were makabel all of the 4, but now we suspect that you broke one of them. This is Gavaldik. You became lax with one of these 4, so the Tanakama here holds chashud hu ala koil. Now we suspect that you're not keeping any of your Kabbalah, which means you go back to being an Amaretz. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Einoi Chashud Ella al Oisa Davar Bulvad. We only suspect him regarding that which we know he's Chashud on. Look inside the Pnei Moshe, way under, around 7 lines before the bottom of the Amud. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Einoi Chashud Ella al Oisa Davar Bulvad. The fact that we see that so you only lose your nemanus for that. Now Vahashta says the Pnei Moshe. Now let's correlate this brayso with our Mishnah. Everyone holds you have to be makabel everything. But if afterwards you went back, you got weak. Now you understand applying it to the case of our Mishnah, which is what was the chashad al davar echad that you were misareach eitzel ha'aretz, right? Im kibel olav tchila ala koel ulav asoik misareach eitzel ha'aretz mamachas. Rabbi Yehuda Sabar the afshu chashad lechal achshav mikol achshav mikol makom eino chashad lahachal achedim. You lose your nemanus, and this actually fits, again, this is the Braisa that ultimately backs up Rabbi Yossi, you lose your ne'amanus while you are in the house of the Am Haaretz. Here, actually, there is another leniency, and that is that when you leave the house of your friend, you automatically go back to the new ne'amanus status. Right, that's the whole sheet of Rabbi Yossi, the Shitas, Rabbi Yehuda. But while you are there, you lose your status. You're chashud, but only aloysa davar bilvad, which is why when you go out, you're gavaldik. The way we learn pshat is that the Mishnah was Misayel Rabbi Yoina. You need to have another Tana, ideally, that's Misayel Rabbi Yossi. Only having Rabbi Yechanan, I know we just said yesterday that Rabbi Yechanan could be viewed as a Tana, but generally he's not viewed as a Tana, he's an Amayra. So now we have this Braisa, that the way the Pnei Moshe links it between this Braisa and our Mishnah, that you become Chashud. Again, how will you become Chashud? According to Rabbi Yoina, even when you're Misareach Eitzel, your friend Ha'am Haaretz, you're not Chashud at all. Okay. Says the Gemara. What happens if a person did not make this formal Kabbalah? But Tani, we learned in the Braisa, Haneman al hataharos. We notice that in the person's behavior, when they eat chulin and they are tahar, they make a point for the food to also be in a state of tahara. Now, eating chulin b'tara is not even a requirement. The requirement is that if the food is ma'aser sheni, then if you're tameh, you may not eat it. Okay? But when it comes to non-ma'aser sheni, when you're going down, there is no need of tahara. Nevertheless, when people became lax altogether in Tumah and Tara, the Chaverim began to at least eat chulin b'tara. Now, I just want to say there's a nuance to it. There are people that eat chulin b'tara. That's the minimum step. Then there's people that eat chulin on the same. They treat it as if it is meiser, as if it is truma, as if it is kachim. There are different levels to that, but we're not going into the details, which are not negeya, but negeya this chaver status, which is trumas meiseris and eating chulin b'tara even on the minimum level. So what happens if a person is neman ala taharos? Automatically is neman ala meiseris. What does that mean? What does that mean? Look inside the Pnei Moshe, 4 lines before the bottom of the Amid. The kivin she'ena chashud al dirabanan kol shchin neman hu al da'idais. So he does get an nemanus. Now, what does that mean, guys? Does that mean that such a person doesn't even have to make a Kabbalah? The Gemara is going to clarify, and that will go on all the way until Daf Yotesama based on the new Mishnah. That's not the case. Clarifies the Gemara that Tanisa, Rabbi Yanai, Rabbi Yishmael, that we had another Braisa, V'amar Taima, that this is the way we are to limit the rule that if you're neman ala taras, you're automatically neman ala maisus. This nemanus is only, we're going to turn to that Yutesam base. If you, let's say you are already a neman, even better, you are already a chavet. You got invited by a host. The host never made the Kabbalah, but the host is known to be careful with taharas. He only eats chulin b'tara. Here is where we had the Baraisa that says you can eat in this house. You can eat in this house. I'm not talking about Rabbi Yehuda's leniency. According to the Chachamim, you're not breaking your commitment. However, but for that person who we know is neman ala taharas, for me to be allowed to buy from him in the marketplace food without needing to tithe it, aval berabim eloy neman achi kabel olav berabim. How great is that? So first of all, parenthetically, the Rabbim, we saw the Rambam says that Rambam, the Hachlata, the Kabbalah has to be in front of 2. Here, look inside the top right column that Asherilio says, but Rabbim means 3 Chavedim. Okay, that's just a detail. But coming back to the concept that even though you're Neman ala Taras and you have a certain Nemanus ala Maisis, you're not yet considered a Neman. Which means that in public, if you sell food, people have to separate the Mais separation. It only means that in private, you can eat in their home. And as we also find that Rav Ami, Shem Rabbi Yanai, Afilu Ani, look at Rabbi Yanai. Rabbi Yanai lived at the time, right after we went through this categorization. You have the Amoritz, you have a Neman. to become a Neman, you have to make a Kabbalah. And if someone did not make a Kabbalah, they can be Rabbi Yanai. They can be this big person. They still won't have Nemanus when it comes to Rabbi, even though you can eat in this house. Rabbi Ami b'shem Rabbi Yanai. Afilu ani eini neman ad. We're going to go with the girsa sha'akabil olai b'rabim.
Why do you trust him in his house then? Why do you trust him in his house?
In other words, that's what we're learning. We're learning another layer today, Kevin. That if a person is neman, even to eat chulin b'tara, then we know that the guy should be trusted when it comes to tithing, but that's only enough for you to eat in his house. Once the Chachamim said that people begin with the status of an Amaretz, the only way you go from an Amaretz to a Neman is by making the Kabbalah Berab.
No, what if you made the Kabbalah at home in front of 3 people?
Well, Rabbi doesn't mean at home and in public, but Rabbi means in front of the 3 people. If you made it in front of 3 people, that's called the Kabbalah Berab.
Got it.
Not the Rishus Rabbim of Hilchas Shabbos over here. Wow. And similarly, Rab Ze'eda and Rabbi Yasser, the Shem Rabbi Yechanan, Afilu Chaver, Sheshalach lechaver. Wow. Sarech la'aser. In other words, the concept is only eating in their home. The moment the food, Hersdani, is not coming in their home, he's not selling it in public, but he's sending it out there. The recipient has to separate the mind. No, there's a certain formal step that you have to do. If you don't do the formal step, you have to separate the mind, with the exception that if you are hosted in their home, then you are okay. What about me? Me. The Ani was even in Taras, he was careful that Rabbi Shmuel, but Rabbi Yitzchak, if I will send produce to him, or if Rabbi Shmuel, but Rabbi Yitzchak will send produce to me, what will be the din? Now the question is, why would he be different? Why would Rabbi Ze'eda think he's different than Rabbi Yechanan? Rabbi Yechanan just said that even I, Rabbi Yechanan, if I would not have made the Kabbalah, I, Birabim, as we just explained, still has the status of Ma'amoritz. So Amalei, so Rabbi Yasser tells Rabbi Ze'eda, Ma'at boim Rabbi Shmuel bar Rabbi Yitzchak. In other words, why do you think you're different than Rabbi Yechanan? That's what we just learned. You have to. There was a necessity at some point in the times of the Tanoim to make this formal acceptance, and from then forever, maybe until the reconvention of the Sanhedrin with the coming of Mashiach, you want to become a Neman, you have to make a Kabbalah, even though you really have Nemanis in your own home. Why would you think you're different? So clarifies the Gemara like this: Rabbi Yechanan, you say by heart. Rabbi Yechanan, perhaps one might think that Rabbi Yechanan's ruling is only regarding a person who grew the produce on their own. Think about it. If I have a vegetable patch, if I have a field, if I grow whatever it is that I'm growing, Midoy Raisa, I'm chayiv to separate from Asomaisis. Since there is a chiyuv on me to do so, Midoy Raisa, since from the times of Yechon and Kohen Gadol, there was too large of a minority of people that were not doing it all the way. So Chazal said, you got to separate the mai. On that, we got it. Until when the person, the farmer, the grower, makes the Kabbalah, he's still under the takana of Yechon and Kohen Gadol, which would mean that anyone who buys it, anyone who receives it, has to separate the mai separation. But however, what happens if I grew nothing? If I bought it from another Jew? When I buy produce from another Jew, I am allowed to assume it was fully tithed, because most of the people always fully tithed everything all the way. Elama, yeah, Yochanan Gadol said that we have to be chayish to that miyuta. That's a derabbanan. So maybe that was the new inquiry. Maybe if the obligation to begin with is only rabbinical, and this is a person that's neman alataras, not selling it in the market. He's sending a gift to someone else. He's not being hosted in my home, but I'm sending it to someone else. Maybe even there I'll be neman. That's why he wondered. The statement of Rabbi Yechanan might be only understood on the farmer. Answers the Gemara. Rabbi Ze'eda clarifies the chol mashu achal min shuko. Maybe Rabbi Yechanan is only speaking about a farmer who is chayiv to tithe it because he grew it. He knows it's devil. But the question that he had, that Reb Zeira had regarding Reb Shmuel bar Rabbi Yitzchak, is that neither of them were farmers, which means that to begin with, their obligation is only the Maya Midrabanan. Maybe we can think that so once a person is Neman, Alatadas, we're speaking about the greatest leaders of the Jewish people, Reb Zeira. Maybe it's okay, but we don't know. So that is why he asked. The question was not answered. So this is an open-ended question.
Can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
So today in the kashrus world, if you have a restaurant, it's a known thing, you need a hefsher. You go to someone's house, no one demands a hefsher.
I love what Danny is saying. Very good.
Maybe there's a correlation.
Very good, very good, very good. Now I heard a shir from this. I forgot Pasha from what time. But look at today's world. Today's world is I can go into your house, and if you're Neman, however that's defined, I eat in your house. But the moment you have a business, you need to have action.
That's the farmer.
That's the farmer.
So making a public declaration would be more similar to a hefsher.
But if you really, really want to compare it, then the question will be, according to what we're learning right now, that means if I were to make a challah and send it to you, you should not be allowed to have it without me having a hefsher. No, it's here we're mamash limiting it. It's the same, but it's not the same. Because by the Mai, it was once you needed the Kabbalah, Rabbi Yochanan is saying that if I would not do the Kabbalah, you can eat it in my home and nothing else. If I would send produce to you as a gift, you have to separate the money.
So people who gift challah to each other.
Where the minig Yisrael now is that if you eat in their home, you accept their challah.
But what was the whole distinction that Reb Zeira was making with Yerushalmi bar Yitzchak?
You're huge because when I grow something, there is a chiyuv for me to tithe it because it's tabel. So that's maybe where we accepted Rabbi Yochanan. That for me to be a neman, I have to make a kabbalah. Right. But if I'm not a farmer,
according to that explanation, that if Rabbi Yochanan is not a farmer, you don't have to.
We don't know that. It's still a question. Maybe still you have to make a kabbalah. And now let's go into the final stretch before the mission. This is a braisa, and this is common. So now notice you have to make this formal declaration, this formal kabbalah. What happens if full neman v'ishtay and an Okay. Yeah. Now the question is, does his reliability become compromised? And the answer is no. Because if a man is living with a woman that's not nemenis, we will assume that whatever he receives from her, if he is not certain that she tithed it, he'll make the demai separations. The Gemara is going to have a very critical statement on such a man in a moment. Let's go. So the din is like chenimenu. No, it's the chiddush. His liability is not compromised because whatever his wife will serve to him, he will tithe. We're speaking about trumas meiser and meiser sheni, and then he'll be pointed. However, but you cannot be a guest in his home. Why? What she puts on his plate is one thing. What she serves to everyone, even though the guy went into the kitchen before the guests came and he probably separated trumas and meiser. Could be this woman felt that she needs additional food. She went to her neighbor, who's an Amoritz, and she borrowed food, and the husband didn't know that. She's the hostess. However, the Chachamim said, it's like living with the snake in the same basket. We're speaking to the man. In other words, what do you think? You think that every time, if a man is living with a snake, guys, it's just a matter of time before you'll get bit. For a person to say, so far, so good, and you're comfortable, don't get comfortable, because even though you think that you're careful and every time your wife serves your food, you separate the demai separations, it's just a matter of time for you not to do it, and you're going to end up eating, God forbid, demai.
No, but doesn't the kashrut in the house go according to the wife anyway? If they're not
That's more or less what we're saying. Well, don't forget,
same religiosity.
You can't fully compare cave and kashrut, and produce. Produce is salvable. In other words, if the food is not kosher, someone's wife serves them not kosher food, other than not eating it, there's no option. Here, there is an option. Okay, now what happens in the opposite? She made the Kabbalah. He's not Neman. So here it's in the reverse. She's the hostess. She's the way the Rebbe always called the wife, the woman, the mother, the Akeres Habayis. She's the Iker of the house. Right? She will set the standard in the kashrus. So misarchen etzloi, but don't purchase anything from him. And now we say, Avalamnu, the sages added, Tavai me'eda. The word me'eda literally means enlightenment, but it's Veloshan Saginod. It's an expression of a curse, that let a curse come upon On a person whose wife is nemenes and he's not nemon, we expect for a man to be inspired by the good example of his wife. So in other words, when a person is on a higher level and the woman is not catching up, that's something that's more acceptable. But if she made this Kabbalah, why was he not inspired to do it? Okay, let's go further. Now let's speak about a waiter. If you, as your livelihood, you are a waiter, you are a chaver, which certainly means a neman, and it's a Mishnah means it's a drinking party. Can a chaver be a waiter there? Why would a chaver not be allowed to be a waiter there? Because he can make people have the delusion that since the waiter is a yid with a long white beard, that means that everything is kosher, and that's not necessarily the case. So don't even serve as a waiter, and not in a meal of an Amaretz, unless Elim Kain, unless the waiter, part of his duty will be that prior to the food being served, he separated all of the my separations. And the type of care that the waiter has to have, the waiter is here like the mashkiach, that va'afilu meineke shel yain, even a wine straw, you have to clean it out. The waiter will have to clean it out because there might be residual wine from the previous party. And again, we're not speaking about, God forbid, yain stump, but we're speaking about yain, that's the mind. Based on this rule, so now if you do find a chaver waiting, a drinking meal, an eating meal, you can go and eat there. Because we rely that the waiter will do his duty. Weiter says the Braisa, if you see the chaver eating there, not serving the food, he's not a waiter, but he's eating there, Eina chazaka, doesn't prove anything. Why not? See, here's the difference between our topic and kashrus. Again, if the food is not kosher, it's not kosher for anyone. If the food is damai, there is a way of rectifying it. Not only is there a way of rectifying it, but we're going to have more details later in our pagination on Daf Samachay and Daf Samach Vav. We're going to learn about becoming a guest in the house over Shabbos. And even though normally Trumas or Maasros may not be removed rabbinically on Shabbos, you could resolve the Mai on Shabbos in certain circumstances. And these are the Tanoim that you only have to do in your heart. And basically that will be, is that the person, right, you have a plate of food. So Truma Maasros is 1%, right? Like we said. So if a person can simply say that the whatever is on the right side of my plate, that is for Trumas Maasros, you won't eat that. And Maaser Sheni, you have to say that I'm separating Maaser Sheni and I'm redeeming it and the money in my pocket. In other words, if I'm eating, if someone who's a Nemon is eating in the house of someone who's an Amaretz, there is a way of rectifying the food in a very private, non-demonstrative way, making it basically very comfortable for everyone to do so. It's very shaykh that you did not even notice that this person did it. So just seeing a person who you know is a chaver or a neman eating at a meal, that doesn't prove anything. Now take into account what Rabbi Yehuda holds. According to Rabbi Yehuda, it for sure doesn't prove anything according to Rabbi Yossi. Think about it, doesn't even have to say. We are expected to remember that. We just learned about it. But even according to Rabbi Yoina, and even according to the Chachamim, was if I know someone is an Amaretz standing, the host, then according to the Chachamim, a man eating there is a problem. He loses the Nemanis. That's what the Chachamim hold in the Mishnah. I'm saying I don't know who the host is. I don't know who he is. Maybe that's the case. But I see a chaver eating there, says the Braisa, doesn't prove anything. Because maybe this person was mafreshit in a way, like we'll learn again, we're going to learn this in greater detail, Daf Samachay, Daf Samach Vav, that you won't even notice it. Because Ani Oimer al Trem Sheli Omeisev.
It's a little counterintuitive.
Why?
You know, you ever see people say like, "Oh, this rabbi, he's a rabbi machshir on that place. Does he eat there?" People say that, and if they see him eating there, then that's usually people say, "Wow." I'll
tell you why that is, because by kashrus, there's no way to fix it unless it's already kosher. That's the big difference. Whereas by kashrus, if it's not kosher, the guy cannot eat it. Here, even if it's not kosher, meaning it's demai, there's a way out. And the way out could be so discreet. No, I didn't see him do it. You wouldn't see him do it. Right. Now,
what happens to what happens to the food on the plate? It gets thrown away.
Good question.
Well, let me say it like this, that 1%. The 1% being that the person, Namaretz, is also not Neman, which means he's Tamei, the presumption is Tamei. Don't forget, this will not be given to a Kohen for it to be eaten. It's going to be
fire and burn it.
It's going to be good question. I'm sure we're going to learn about that later.
But it's not Vadai.
We're going to learn about it. We're going to learn about now. The final case is that Benoi Mesav Etzloi. That if you have a chaver, again, you have a meal served by Yam Haaretz, and the chaver is saying he's eating there, can the son eat from the plate of his father? In other words, will the father feel responsible as he's separating for himself discreetly, removing the Demai issue? A father will feel responsible to do it for his son. And here we are, Dafka, speaking about a son who's a minor. That's the way we'll understand it. But Chaveroi, anyone other than his minor son, the Chaver who's eating there, doesn't necessarily feel responsible to resolve it for his friend. So, bottom line is you can also eat there, but you have to resolve your own food. Look inside that Ashadilio, the top of the left column. That's the way you feel. So you, the father, will for sure also do these separations on behalf of the son. So this Braisa is speaking to the son, you can go eat from your father's plate. And Samech means that you're not a minor, you're not being supported by him. Therefore, the chaver who made the Tanai discreetly doesn't feel achroi of doing it for his fellow. So if you want to eat there, you have to make the same stipulations. We'll learn later. And you also discreetly should remove the Truma Sumaisers.
So the father sitting with his son, are we saying that the same way the father could theoretically
I think the father will. The father will do it.
Plate, he'll also have in mind his son's.
The son, and therefore the son can go. And therefore the son can eat. But his friend, who's next to him, who's not Soimecholov, he's not being supported by him, will have to do it on his own. Okay. So Atkan is going from an Amoritz to a Chaver, to a Neman. Excuse me. That's the correction we made today. Now Halacha Gimel. Let's at least begin the Mishnah. We are going to the next step up, and that's becoming a Chaver. So says the Mishnah, Hamakabel Olav Liyais Chaver. Once you want to make a hachlata, a kabbalah, not only the 4 details that we learned in halacha base, but you're adding that you want to become a chaver. So you can't just make again a general statement. I'm going to be a chaver. I'm going to be nizar. I'm going to eat chol and betaro. You have to also specify the following. Look inside the Rashirilio, the left side, 3rd line from the top. Liyos chaver, which is also called a parush, because there were so few chavedim that they did de facto separate themselves, right, from others. Umilvad shuneman ala maisres. In other words, not only do you want to become a neman ala maisres, bekabel olav liyois liyoisay achshav neman ala avtaharos. You want to be neman also for regarding tum and tara. Practically, that means says that ashadilio utruma say truma. And truma is truma regardless, but it's truma tohoida. So the recipient, the kohen, doesn't have to presume that it's tamei. And here he goes and he explains why are we using the words chaver? Because regarding the chsiv gabe mitzvahs am misecha am sheitcha b'torah mitzvahs, someone who's equal to you, that's real chavrus, camaraderie based on equality. He's called a chaver because he can't know. There's 2 things. You're equal, and also because you care about your other. Because if I'm not going to be nizar myself, I will sooner or later be machshel someone else. How am I your friend if I'm giving you food that's not kosher? How am I your friend if I'm giving you food that's tamei? I don't even know it's tamei. I'm allowing you to think with myself that it's tohida. So that's the meaning of the word chaver. So here are the details that you have to specify. I have to accept upon myself, and again, according to the Rashidilya in front of 3. If I remember correctly, at least the Rambam says in front of 2, that what? That Eina Moicher Lama Aretz, I will never sell produce that's Tohoida to Ama Aretz, whether it's Lach. Lach means whether it was wetted. Doesn't matter what its status is right now. Quickly reminding ourselves that for anything that grows of the ground, for it to become Tameh, it's not only about did a source of Tuma have halachic content. Of course, that's needed. Not how is it Tameh. But food, after it was cut off the ground, needed to become wet with the contentment of the owner, with any one of the 7 halachic liquids. That means it needed to become mukhshar to become Tameh, even if it's dry right now, it's mukhshar to become Tameh. So that's he has to promise, he has to make this Kabbalah. I will never sell to Ama Aretz. Not only produce that became lach in the past, which is mukhshar, but not even yavesh. Wow. Ad kedei kach. Ad kedei kach. Why? Look inside the Rashidil, your 5 lines from the bottom. Not even yavesh. Now, of course, if I'm a chaver and I own tamei food, of course I can sell it to Ama Aretz. What's the issue with tahara to an Ama Aretz? Shelo yitamei Ama Aretz. He should not make it tamei. Oiteshev aleim ishtoi nida. And there's a rule midrabanan that ain't moislim taharas lama Aretz. But once there was this higher standard of eating chulin, even the tara, even though biblically I'm allowed to make chulin tamei, I'm allowed to do that. At that time onwards, Chavedim did not do that, and that includes not only will I not make it tamei, I won't even give it to an Ama Aretz, even if it's yavesh. And now just one more line: if there was food that was owned by the Ama Aretz, if it was known to have become lach prior to my purchase, I won't purchase it. Why? Because as far as I'm concerned, the other, if he's not yet a chaver, I'm presuming he's tamei, and I'm not going to buy tamei dika food. Now, I want to make something clear before we'll stop over here. We'll continue next year from the middle of the Mishnah. A chaver who's tamei would eat chulin tameya. Chulin tameya is allowed to be consumed. There's no baltashlas going on over here. All right, truma tameya may not be eaten. Chulin tameya is allowed to be eaten. But the fact that the chaver made an effort to stay in a status of tahara, he made the effort to keep his food in the status of tahara. If something became tamei, he would wait until he becomes tamei, or one of his friends become to eat it. But nevertheless, once food, chulin, was tahira, we needed to make an effort to keep it that way, and we needed to know that the food is tahira. How can I know that if this food was lach and I bought it from an Ama Aretz? I don't know. So therefore, when it comes to selling, I won't even sell him food yavesh, because the Ama Aretz can make it wet and then later make it tamei. When it comes to buying, here the hachlata that I have to make is ve'ena lekech v'menu lach. Now, am I allowed about it? It sounds like if the Ama Aretz, his food was never made wet yet after it was disconnected from the ground, I am allowed to buy it. We're going to learn in the Gemara more details about that. Like, how will I know that? I can't trust him, etc. So we are in middle of the Kabbalahs that you have to make to become not only a Neman, but even a Chaver. Yes.
Question.
Yes.
Is the Amharis Kabbalah, do we say that's almost like the ger going to a mikveh?
Yes. Yeah.
And the second one, why doesn't the Amharis go in front of a Beit Din to become?
It doesn't have to do with that. Well, according to the Rashidilio, that's the 3. According to the Rambam, it's only 2. I'm going to check on that, and if I made a mistake, I'll correct myself in the beginning of next year, guys.